Bro, look, I'm not being a dick for this, right? But let's see. One thing I hate about software engineering is when software people implement something in a programming language, and what they do is they call out to the shell to do the thing. Like, I drastically despise this, and I feel like, personal opinions, you probably should just use a configuration management tool, because then that way more people have the capability to more easily understand what's going on. Whereas, like, if you use a programming language to shell out, to run commands, that essentially just makes it seem like it just makes it more complicated for people to access that. Rather, if you use an Ansible playbook, it makes it drastically better and easier for everyone else, right? Makes it more accessible, makes it more debuggable. It's much more cleaner than shelling out to the shell. Personal opinion. Secondly, on a second note, is the cost of running a team, right? Like, can I as an individual, right? If I have a business, can I afford SREs to monitor my applications? Can I afford specific engineers to deploy Postgres, database engineers, and all that type of stuff, right? All that, right? Can I afford that? Or is it cheaper for me to just use the cloud service provided infrastructure? In the past, where I've run into issues with this has been relating to particular extensions or particular access to particular features of the database that hasn't been made available by the cloud provider, right? But essentially, for the most part, most things are available. So, for example, in Postgres, it's things like loading extensions and stuff like that. It hasn't always been necessarily accessible for everyone. Well, for me anyway. So, but then I identify that it's actually probably drastically cheaper than implementing a full-fledged team as a solo engineer who is trying to operate on the minimal amount as possible, because success for the product is not guaranteed, or success for whatever it is that I'm doing is not guaranteed. And yeah, vendor lock-in is a issue, but it's not that much of an issue that if I feel I have the necessary level of confidence in the provider that I'm working with, and I trust their operational practices in terms of privacy, in terms of general fairness, in terms of operational responsibility, such as they keep the SLAs, what's the uptime, can I really trust this organization? Then what's the problem with me engaging in that lock-in with that individual, right? It's similar to marriage. Like, why would you get married, right? At the end of the day, if we consider it, like, why would you get married? It's the same way you enter an agreement with the provider, with the cloud provider, in the hopes that they'll be able to keep up to your demand for however long. Now, when it comes to cost, yes, that's a factor in it. But how much does an employee cost? Right? How much does an engineer cost? And is that engineer willing to work to the extent to which these cloud providers would be able to give the same level of performance in terms of SLAs, in terms of uptime, and in terms of dependability? Like, can I depend on the employee, or can I depend on the cloud provider more because they have that in line? So these are the questions that I'm ultimately battling with at the moment. And personally, I feel that, like, essentially my cloud provider of choice has always been ideally GCP, but AWS is perfect in most instances as well. And so moving forward, I really have to take the opportunity to really evaluate how it is I want to approach this, right? Even like Kubernetes, do I want to use Kubernetes? Right, Kubernetes is more geared towards the team environment. Do I want to implement a Kubernetes-driven system, or do I want to just work natively with the VMs, which for me is generally tends to be more rewarding. I feel like the cost and the complexity that comes with Kubernetes may not be as rewarding, but since the advent of KubeVirt, it's ultimately questionable. Kubernetes might be able to meet the demands, but essentially, I think that's the problems that we're sort of running into at the moment. It's like motherfuckers shelling out stuff. Stop shelling out stuff. Best thing's probably just to move to Ansible. For the most part, don't get sidetracked in people running shell commands. Is it really worth it to have a software-defined process for handling some of the tasks that one wants to do, or is it just better to just go into Ansible from the ground up, which might be much better? I think yeah, in most instances it might just be better just Ansible playbooks, have some type of system behind that. But again, we'll see, right? I think that's the process. It's the process of seeing and coming to a full-fledged understanding of what yields the best results, what's the cheapest method without having to cut out people. But since obviously one's just starting or one's bootstrapping, I want to focus on the engineering efforts that truly ultimately bring the most value into the environment in which I manifest, or into the environment that I summon out of heaven, right? Because we bring down the environment, or we bring down, and also don't forget that I can terraform, which is also pretty cool. So being able to terraform just makes things a whole lot easier from a cloud perspective, right? It makes everything just fucking like drastically stress-free. So these are some of the problematic things that one's coming across at the moment, just thinking or dabbling with. I don't have a particular business idea in mind, nor do I have a particular plan in mind. I've got a lot of things to get through before I even get to the point of actually implementing a business of some sort. But I think strategically, these are things that one's going to have to evaluate in order to ensure that they become beneficial to me in the long run. Which also comes down to, and GCP also offers the credits, which will be helpful in the onset, but I think applying for them is quite a difficult task, but I'm sure I can overcome that because they require the specific requirements that I would meet. So yeah, that's our thoughts at the present moment.